Hello everybody, welcome to my first Hearts of Iron video. Today, it's going to be a little bit of a jokey video, but it's sort of a jokey, serious video. I'm not really sure how to put it. We're going to be looking at the top worst possible countries you could possibly play in Hearts of Iron. This is going to be based on their starting positions, their factories, their militaries, and all the rest of it, and their potential. But these are the absolute worst countries in Hearts of Iron. It was going to be a top 10 list, but there's actually 11, and that's because I've included all of the countries which I believe to be literally unplayable. If you're an insanely sweaty person, maybe as a joke you've tried to play one of these countries, but you can't seriously try to be competitive with these countries without the assistance of somebody else. I'm going to start off with the honourable mentions, just to give you an idea of how bad the following countries are going to be. These honourable mentions are significantly better than the countries on this list. The honourable mentions for this video are Honduras, El Salvador, Cuba, Luxembourg, and Ireland. All of the countries on this list are significantly worse than any of those honourable mentions. So let's begin. So beginning, the best country on the list of worst countries in the game, my mouse is broken, is Paraguay. Paraguay was on the list because it was bad enough to be considered bad, but it wasn't bad enough to be literally the worst country in the game. So Paraguay starts with a population of 937,000 between its two provinces. It's probably also the only province on this list with only country on this list with two provinces in it. Paraguay starts with 3 subpar divisions. They're all pretty horrendous. They've only got 6 infantry and no support, but they're still markedly better than any of the other countries on this list. Paraguay actually starts with a fairly good number of factories. They start off with, well, good, that's a very relative, of course, 3 civilian factories and 1 military factory. Paraguay also starts off with 2 steel and 4 tungsten, which is, as far as this list goes, that's not too bad. Also, Paraguay only has the standard focus tree, which is a theme that will be quite long-running in this list. Most of the terrible countries in the game don't have a focus tree of anything. And just a heads up, I actually play this game with the RT56rp mod. I actually host this game for games with 20 to 30 players several times every week, so this video will be tailored towards that mod, though realistically, it doesn't really make any difference at all for most of these countries, because they're so small that not even the mod bothers with them. Finally, Paraguay is also at the top of the list, surely because it has a river line running all the way along the south side of the country, which acts as a natural defense. If you do manage to build up some military of some kind, you can actually defend yourself relatively well from countries like Argentina, though Brazil would probably be able to walk right into you. Also, Paraguay is completely covered in thick jungle, so if you train your military to operate fairly well in jungle, then you could potentially actually hold out an attack against one of your surrounding countries, if you are fortunate. Finally, Paraguay has no viable expansion. You don't really have much, well, you have no hope of invading Argentina, and you have no hope of invading Brazil. However, you could potentially, if you were really lucky, invade Bolivia, but I'm not sure what your odds of being successful at this are. Overall, Paraguay is actually playable, but it's probably the only country on this entire list that's really even somewhat playable. Okay, so the next country on this list, which is number 10, as there are 11 terrible countries instead of 10, number 10 is Ecuador. Ecuador starts with a population of 2.08 million, most of which is saturated in this one province. Ecuador also starts with 1 mediocre division. It's still got 6 in it, which is pretty good compared to most of the countries on this list, but obviously it has no support whatsoever. Ecuador also starts with a respectable number of factories, having 4 civilian factories and, I believe, 1 military factory, which is not too bad, as I said, by all standards on this list. It has 0 naval factories, despite actually having a coast, and despite having a little island state over there. Ecuador also has 3 oil, which means, in theory, you could power some tanks or, maybe some boats or planes. You have enough oil to actually power a small independent air force or navy, though the odds of you ever building one are relatively slim, maybe a few fighters at best. Ecuador also suffers from the standard focus tree. Ecuador, another bright side for Ecuador is it does have a very strong river defense protecting the east and the south of the country. This would potentially allow you to even hold out from an invasion from Peru, though it wouldn't really do much to protect you from Colombia. And finally, you don't really have any viable options of invading Colombia or Peru, as both are significantly stronger than you are. And that puts Ecuador at number 10 on this list. Number 9 on this list. This is a slight cheat, but I've decided to include 2 countries on the same entry, because they're basically the same realistically, and one thing that applies to one of them also applies to the other. And that is the Dominican Republic and Haiti. These are my 2 countries for this decision. So I've joined them together. This is because they're on a very small island, first of all, which means realistically, to be honest, with such a small country, you're going to be stuck on that island regardless. Neither of them have an air force or a navy of any kind. They both have very small starting armies. So both of these countries start with, I believe, the same number of civilian and military factories. They start with 3 civilian factories and 1 military factory, though I might be wrong here. But either way, their industry is absolutely abysmal. They start with a population of 1.25 million for the Dominican Republic and 2.38 million for Haiti, respectively, though in practice it won't really make much difference. Neither of them has a dockyard. The Dominican Republic has 1 chromium. Haiti has 3 chromium, so in theory, Haiti is probably slightly better than the Dominican Republic on this scale. They both start with a default focus tree and do not have custom focus trees, even the RT56 mod or RP mod. Both of them have no natural barriers apart from the fact that they are an island state, but there's nothing really defending you from the other side of the island apart from a bit of mountain and hills in one side, which in theory makes it easier to defend as the Dominican Republic rather than Haiti. And lastly, which has already been mentioned, your only real expansion options are to invade the other side of the island, which realistically isn't exactly much of an accomplishment. And overall, that is why the Dominican Republic and Haiti are joint in 9th place on this list. Next up on this list, in 8th place, is Uruguay. So Uruguay may not seem to be in such a bad position. In fact, at first look, it actually looks like quite a good, well, relatively good compared to this list starting position. It has a population of 1.73 million. It starts with 2 starting divisions, which are poor, only 4 battalions, whatever you want to call them, in there, and no support. Uruguay actually has a very good starting industry. It has 6 civilian factories, 1 military factory, and 1 naval factory, which by far gives it the most powerful industry on this list. It also starts with 2 steel and 2 oil, so on paper that could be quite good. The only downside with Uruguay is you literally have no way of expanding whatsoever. You've not got a hope in hell of invading Brazil, and you haven't got a hope in hell of invading Argentina. Also, the river line with Argentina may sort of help you with defending a little bit, but realistically they've got 3 provinces to attack through, and you start with 2 divisions. And even if you build more, realistically, they will be able to overpower you quite quickly. Uruguay also starts with the standard focus tree and does not have a custom focus tree, even with the RT56rp mod, which is the mod focus tree here. This is the default one. The default one in this mod is probably better than the default one in the base game, but it's definitely nothing to write home about. So the main thing that offsets Uruguay, making it worse than the last entry on the list, is the fact that there is no way to invade anyone around you whatsoever, no matter what you do. And realistically, if you look at a map, Uruguay probably looks like it belongs as a part of Brazil after all. And that probably says something about the fate of Uruguay in an RP game. Next up on this list, in 7th place, is Nicaragua. Nicaragua? I think Nicaragua. Sorry, my pronunciation is terrible. Now, Nicaragua, you can ask, isn't this worse than Uruguay? I mean, better than Uruguay, perhaps? Because, you know, you've got other smaller neighbours you can invade. And the answer is basically no, not in my opinion. As I said, you're entitled to disagree, but in my opinion, Nicaragua has a vastly smaller population with 638,000. They have 1 weak starting division, which only has 3, bunches of soldiers in, battalions. It also only starts with 2 civilian factories, 1 military factory, and only a measly 1 chromium, as well as the default focus tree. And this puts it significantly worse than Uruguay in my opinion. One benefit of Nicaragua is it is defended from the south by a lake and a river, which means it's unlikely that Costa Rica can invade you. However, Honduras, on the other hand, can walk right in. And you may notice this later on, but I'm going to tell you straight up now. Honduras is not actually on this list, which I may come to in another video quite shortly. The only thing that puts Nicaragua higher up on this list than the following entries is that Nicaragua gives you quite a good position to invade both Costa Rica and Panama, assuming that America does not get involved. Obviously, the river can work as a counter-defensive thing for Costa Rica, but you have more potential to build more soldiers than Costa Rica does. So all in all, Nicaragua will overpower Costa Rica, and that brings them in at 7th place on this list. Number 6 on this list. This is going to be a surprising entry for many of you. However, a clue is that in the vanilla game, this would most likely be number 1 on the list, but not in RT56rp. I was surprised. We're looking at Bhutan. Bhutan is number 6 on the worst list of unplayable countries in Hearts of Iron 4 with the RT56rp mod. Now, looking at it in the vanilla game, it is an absolutely diabolically terrible country. It starts with a population of a mere 450,000. It starts with not a single division. It starts with only 2 civilian factories and 1 military factory. And it starts with no dockyards, or obviously not even a coastline whatsoever. And it starts with 2 tungsten. The whole of Bhutan is mountain, which can help in its defense. But there is a reason that makes Bhutan in RT56rp significantly better than the following countries on the list. And if you haven't guessed it, that is that Bhutan in the RT56rp mod has a focus tree. And that appears to be a pretty impressive focus tree. You start off with one option, to deny the call to war. And then from there you have many options to expand your industry, to expand your research, and even to join communist Russia, which is interesting. It is not a large focus tree, but it is nevertheless an interesting focus tree. And if you would like to just spectate a game, sort of see what everyone else around you is doing, while enjoying the roleplay and negotiation aspect of the game, Bhutan could be a new form of Switzerland for you. And that brings them into 6th place on this list. The next country on this list, popping into 5th place, is Guatemala. Guatemala starts with a population of 177 million. It has 1 very poor starting division, with 3 battalions in it, which is obviously worse than the countries higher up on this list. It also starts with 2 civilian factories and 1 military factory. It has 0 dockyards, despite having 2 coastlines. One thing that Guatemala does have going for it is the fact that it has 6 chromium. This is still abysmal compared to any country you should actually consider playing, but it is not bad compared to the other terrible countries on this list, I suppose. Finally, Guatemala has no natural borders whatsoever, really. I mean, in the north from Mexico, it does have some mountains and some forest. But from the south, from Honduras, which is another country which I did mention is not on this list, it has no defences. Which means, in reality, they are very likely to be conquered. This is not what this video is focused on, but 2 countries that are not on this list are Honduras and El Salvador, and I hope to cover them in another video of countries which you would expect to be terrible, but are really actually quite playable. So finally, Guatemala has no options for expansion. You cannot really expand into Mexico, and you cannot really expand into Honduras or El Salvador. Theoretically, you could take this area of land from Britain, and Britain probably won't care enough to come and take it back from you, but I don't really think that's anything to brag about. And that brings Guatemala into 5th place on this list. In 4th place on this list, we are stopping on Costa Rica. Now, Costa Rica is bad, but it's not that bad. It's basically a worse version of Nicaragua, and that's why it is higher up or lower, depending on how you see this, on this list. Costa Rica starts with a population of 504,000. It starts with 0 starting divisions, which is why Nicaragua can just walk right in and take it quite easily. And it also starts with a terrible industry, with only 2 civilian factories, 1 military factory, and no dockyards. It does start with 1 chromium, which is something it also has in common with both Nicaragua and Honduras. Finally, the only reason this is not lower on the list is because you do have the option of invading Panama, and if I had to say who would have the advantage between Panama and Costa Rica, I would say that Costa Rica can comfortably take the western half of Panama, though it won't succeed in taking the eastern half of Panama. But yeah, it's still pretty abysmal all in all, and that is why Costa Rica is going to be in 4th place on this list. It does have limited protection in the north from the river and the jungle, but realistically I think Nicaragua will just overpower you in the end. And that is why Costa Rica is 4th on this list. In 3rd place on the list, I'm not even going to reload the game, because it's the neighbour, Panama. Panama is a pretty terrible country. The only thing you can really enjoy is the fact that you technically have a little bit of control over the Panama Canal. But realistically, America's going to usurp your dominance, and America's going to have the final say on anyone going through it. If you're allied with America, you can obviously go on through, even if Panama hates you, because you're friends with America. Panama has a population of 468,000. One benefit you may have of playing Panama is the fact that if you have America's support, they may allow you to expand into the other countries and support you in doing so. So Panama could therefore effectively be a regional management tool for the United States. You start with 3 civilian factories and 1 military factory, as well as 1 drop of oil. That oil may be important for having a small local air force, and obviously you've got the Panama Canal, but that's really all you've got, and realistically I think unless you enjoy the roleplay aspect again, Panama is a country that you're not going to ever touch. And as I said, without any assistance, you're not going to have any way of expanding, and that's why Panama is in 3rd on this list. In 2nd place, we have got a country which is not in the South American Peninsula, I think for the first time in this entire video. And that is Liberia. Liberia is in Africa, and completely and utterly surrounded by both Britain and France, so you have no way of expanding anywhere whatsoever, unless they decide to give you some colonies through diplomacy, which obviously in an RP game, as I like to play, is somewhat possible, I suppose. Liberia starts with a population of 745,000, which isn't bad. They also start with 1 division, but it is absolutely abysmal, with only 2 battalions, meaning it's effectively going to do nothing at all whatsoever. Liberia also only has 1 civilian factory and 1 military factory. And yes, they have a little bit of rubber, but realistically, you're never even going to have enough factories to use that rubber to begin with. You've got no neighbours, no defences, and absolutely nothing to do with your life, as well as the default focus tree. So Liberia is an absolutely horrendous country to play. And that's why it's in 2nd. Now, I'm guessing from this list that you've seen so far, you're going to be able to guess which country is number 1. So try and guess in your head right now. In the vanilla game, it might well be Bhutan. But because of the RT56rp mod, Bhutan is actually okay for a roleplay experience. So take your guess on what the final country might be. The final country on this list, the absolute worst, abysmal, unplayable country in Hearts of Iron 4 with the RT56rp mod, or in vanilla most likely, with the exception of Bhutan. If Bhutan was the original meme country, this is going to be number 2. Tanutuva. Tanutuva is a communist satellite state of Soviet Russia. Realistically, you can't invade Russia, and you can't invade Mongolia. Therefore, you are truly, completely, and utterly isolated as Tanutuva. You start with a terrible, abysmally bad division with just 2 battalions. On top of that, you start with only 1 civilian factory, 1 military factory, and 2 chromium, and you have the default focus tree, which gives you absolutely nothing to do, no aspirations, and because your only ally here is Soviet Russia, unless they give you some of Siberia, you don't even have RP value to go with. If you're fortunate, your Russia may allow you to have some Russian lands just for the RP value, but realistically, it's quite unlikely, and that makes Tanutuva by far the worst country in Hearts of Iron 4. Thank you for watching this video. This was my first attempt at making a Hearts of Iron video. I know it was a bit of a joke as we were looking at countries that are so abysmally bad to play that you literally just do not even want to consider playing them no matter what you're doing. I mean, when I think about it, realistically, you could have some countries that are just as bad, like Yemen and Oman are probably just as bad as the countries on this list. But realistically, any of those countries are so abysmally terrible that you're never ever going to consider actually playing them. So thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, leave a like. Please leave a comment if you'd like to see more videos like this. I would like to do some actual more serious videos on countries that are perhaps underdogs, they're perhaps not as good as some of the major countries, but they can still be really good. And even countries like Luxembourg come into that category. So if you like my style of presenting, you'd like to see more of these videos, please leave a comment. and hopefully I will see you soon. Thank you for watching.